Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden, the gentleman to my opposite side. His name is Tim, and this is The Second Legacy, and thank you so much for stopping by. Today, we are going to talk about something that has the makings of greatness for us and terror for gun control advocates everywhere, because the SCOTUS, as we film this video, is contemplating a decision which has dramatic consequences, and we're going to walk through everything right now. It is all linked in the description box if you want to find out more, and make sure you like, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on so you can help Second Legacy grow, and thank you for your consideration on that. So, Tim, we're going to dive right into this. I'm pretty amped about this. This has potential to undermine a lot of gun control real quick before we even get into it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that they can strike down goofy gun control, I'm all for it. It gives me a warm and fuzzy, and this one gives me a warm and fuzzy. But I can understand why some folks might look at this and go, I don't know about this.
Well, I'm glad you got the warm and fuzzy, because personally, my Tims, when they're warm and fuzzy, they're the best content anyway. When they're cranky and ornery, it's not as great. Sometimes funny, though.
Find something to be cranky about.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. It's not working. But for the people watching, what we're going to talk about is the Supreme Court deciding if the Biden administration pleas God help us, we don't want this gun control to be overturned, are going to be heeded or turned away. Because this is about domestic abusers, or what they define as domestic abusers, and restraining orders. The SCOTUS holds the future in the hand. So let me just show you what we're talking about. Number 3, Mr. Producer, SCOTUS to look at law barring accused domestic abusers from buying guns. Now, Tim, you and I covered this when it was a thing before this even happened with the SCOTUS, but we got to talk about what is actually defined as a domestic abuser, because that's the details that are in the gray. This is where it gets really bad, right?
Well, beyond that, look at that title one more time. Barring accused domestic abusers. Accused.
Accused.
So this goes back
like
to the whole
court
argument
of law. Yeah,
I mean, this is right at the very root of guilty until proven innocent. All somebody has to do is make an accusation against you, and then, boom, you stand accused. Now we're going to take your rights away, and then a couple years from now, when this gets settled in court, then we'll decide whether or not we want to give you your rights back. And
exactly.
On top of that, when you're talking about domestic abuse, that varies from state to state, how it's defined. Mm-hmm. And I know of states where if the police are called by, say, a neighbor, they hear a ruckus at the house next door, the police show up. The police on a domestic are going to take somebody to jail. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
some
jurisdictions require that the parties be separated. That means somebody's leaving the house. Sometimes that means going to jail. And that means if this isn't rectified, then somebody that just stands accused, and generally speaking, it's the guy that goes to jail, right?
Generally, yeah.
And so you're basically stripping people of their rights without due process based on an allegation. And to me, it just seems asinine.
Oh, absolutely. But does that sound familiar? That last little piece? And maybe there's a thread of commonality of why the Biden administration is pushing so hard. Due process rights, guilty until proven innocent. You can't have your gun rights because we assume. Does that sound like, red flag laws? Like maybe one of the underpinnings of the gun control movement over the last 2 years? The reason that this is so important, if you're watching this video, understand nothing of the gun control world happens in a vacuum. The reason they're hitting this so hard is because there's no guilty verdict here and you've lost your rights. But there's the exact same case in the red flag laws. You pull this thread, you pull that thread, and the entire thing falls apart. That is why this is so important. Now, Tim, I know that we talked about this, but it's unusual for the Biden administration or any presidential administration to beg and plead for the SCOTUS to take a look at a case, isn't it?
That is really weird. Very weird.
Almost like they know it. And
right.
That is what we're hitting at right now. So, Mr. Producer, if you could hit number 4, got some more info for the people. As the Supreme Court justices race to finish up the current term, they will meet behind closed doors on Thursday, today, to consider whether they should add a blockbuster Second Amendment case to the docket for next term. The focus is a federal law that bars an individual subject to a domestic violence restraining order from possessing a firearm. Now, notice that wording there, Tim. Possessing, not purchasing, not possessing. That means someone who's out there watching this video, if there's an altercation or someone's mad at somebody else, or according to some states, a girlfriend is upset and you broke up, there's a restraining order against you, and all of a sudden you've lost a lot of pretty core rights. That's what's at the crux of this. And again, you are not convicted of anything. This is just he scares me, I don't want him near me. How about a restraining order? And there's no court of law involved other than a judge saying there's a restraining order. That's what's at stake here.
Yeah, and restraining orders many times are just given out like candy to anybody that requests them. In my state, it's not uncommon for, during a divorce proceeding, for the other parties, person that they're representing going to the court and requesting a restraining order, and this isn't even made known to the other party until that person tries to do something where they require a background check. Then all of a sudden they find out they have a restraining order against them. And so we've had customers come into our store that have had that problem. I also have a very close friend whose fiance he broke up with and canceled the wedding. She got a restraining order against him, lied to police. And then when I confronted her about it in email, she admitted to me that she had lied, and still he had to fight for his rights back in court. It took him years to get his rights back, and she was never charged for filing a false police report.
No consequences.
Right. And so this is why I'm opposed to these things. Some people raise an eyebrow and go, well, you support giving potentially violent people that are going to, harm their spouse or their other, loved one or significant other. And that's just crazy talk. No, you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes here.
Exactly.
This is a mechanism by which they can strip you of your rights on hearsay evidence just because somebody's mad about something.
Exactly. That is the crux of the problem here. Now that you see that, and Tim, this is really great because we're getting into the nitty gritty here. That also adds color to why the Biden administration would push so hard to get this approved or at least decided amongst the Supreme Court after they just got the Bruen decision handed down. By the way, it was a terrible decision according to them, but now they've got good clarification. Isn't it interesting how that shoe on the different foot kind of situation kind of starts to...
There was a terrible decision, but wait, my son's facing federal gun charges. It's actually a great decision. And
it's a great decision.
Yeah.
Look how convenient this is. Exactly.
Funny how that works with politicians. Right?
Isn't it crazy? Well, Mr. Producer, could you hit number 5? I got some more information for the beautiful people. In the case at hand, the conservative-leaning 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals cited the Supreme Court's New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen decision in holding the domestic violence-related gun law unconstitutional, a move that critics say will make it easier for alleged abusers to obtain firearms, per what Tim was saying. Under ordinary circumstances, and this is the payoff, once the Supreme Court releases a major opinion, they reject immediate follow-on cases so that the issue can percolate in the lower courts. The Biden administration, however, is moving with a degree of urgency, asking the justices to step in immediately. Again, the norm is they let it percolate. Now, Tim, does this remind you of something that happened back in January in New York around the sensitive cases law and the exact same SCOTUS? Are any bells ringing for you?
No, man, I don't have any bells.
Oh, dang. Okay, don't worry. I got the bells. So, if you guys do not recall, and you aren't up on the SCOTUS acceptance and denials, in January, there was a GOA case that came forward around New York's sensitive places. The entire thing was New York's new sensitive places law was unconstitutional, and they were trying to push it through the courts and get the SCOTUS to intervene. The SCOTUS declined. Check this out. Number 6, Mr. Producer. Supreme Court leaves New York handgun restrictions in force. Okay? Listen to what they said and tell me if there's any parallels here. The U.S. Supreme Court, number 7, please. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to block New York's new handgun restrictions, leaving in force a ban on firearms in designated sensitive locations, including buses, parks, and stores where the owner doesn't want weapons. The justices turned away an emergency request from 6 gun owners of America members who sought to block much of the law while their legal challenge goes forward. Isn't that interesting, Tim, that the shoe is on the other foot? They lauded this decision from the SCOTUS not to get involved around this case, but now all of a sudden it's urging them to get involved because, after all, this is accused domestic violence resistance orders, or restriction orders.
Well, when you have a political agenda, that's what happens.
No, you're not implying. You're not implying that they would change depending on which way the wind was blowing, which way favored them, would you?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends. Exactly what you just said. What favors them is what they're going to support. They have weird? No consistency in this whatsoever, especially the Biden administration.
Oh, 100%. I mean, politicians in general, but the Biden administration is pretty rough. Okay, so now my favorite part, Tim. The over-under, your thoughts on this. What do you think? Pending the prior decision with New York, do you think the SCOTUS is going to accept this case for a later time in next year's docket? Or do you think they're going to decline it, of which they will shatter the Biden administration's gun control dreams, undermine red flag laws, and leave this ruling in place?
Oh, it is so hard to be hopeful. That's what the Supreme Court is going to do, man. It really is. I don't think I would bet on this one.
Okay.
Because it's I would like to think, well, no. I'm going to withhold on this one. I just want to see what happens. What do you think?
I feel okay. I'm gonna throw myself on the train tracks here.
All right.
I feel that they're going to decline the case and let the case courts percolate it exactly like they did prior in the New York cases, because there's now precedent of them turning down another case as well on the other side of the aisle. That's what I think. I can see that. That's just me. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
But I can also see the Supreme Court stepping in. I mean,
don't pee my Cheerios right now, Tim.
No. I think your scenario is probably the most likely, but the Supreme Court could certainly step in on this one.
But still,
I think one thing that gets people concerned about this potential decision is the fact that you're talking about domestic abusers, right? Just on the surface, that sounds really, really bad. You don't want to give guns to them. You know
so
what I mean?
Perception is worse there than sensitive places.
And unfortunately, such perceptions that have no basis in law or anything like that, just people's feelings interfere with these types of really important decisions.
Well, and that's the entire gun control modus operandi. That's their entire approach.
It's all about feelings.
It's all emotions.
Feelings for them. Yep. It's all
and
about
scary
emotions.
words.
That's why when something bad happens, they waste no time getting in front of a camera and calling 100%. For more gun control, because they know if they wait a couple of days, then they're not going to be able to capitalize on the emotions. So,
which, for another topic for another video, is one of the more disgusting things that we see in our politics. To be quite honest, I despise that stuff.
Well, and the anti-gunners do all sorts of crazy stuff. Like they're constantly updating their various assault weapons bans and their various bans, and they always have them just sitting there waiting in the wings for something bad to happen so they can trot it out and say, "This is what we propose," within minutes of the news breaking.
I got to be honest, though. I think my personal favorite over the past 6 months has definitely been the buckets of white privilege to finally get gun. I think that's far. So of all of it, I think it's my favorite.
There's been some pretty interesting stories pop in the news.
There's been some good
regarding, race and gun control and things that people are trying to do to leverage race. We covered one of those topics. They're just grasping for straws at this point. They're just
not even big
so
straws.
Desperate. Yeah,
little straws.
What's that?
Tiny straws. They're going for tiny straws. Not even big straws.
They are.
Tiny straws.
they're trying to go for the low-hanging straws, but they're missing.
Exactly. Oh, take us out of here. We're going to get in trouble.
All right, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this does play out. I mean, what do you guys think? What do you think the SCOTUS is going to do? Comment down below. We love reading those comments. If you guys would like to be part of our call-in show, there is a link in the video description below. Follow that link. Fill out the questionnaire. We'll get in touch with you, and we'll get you on the show. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.